Hello and welcome to News in Depth here on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. NATO's eastern flank faces mounting pressure. Russian drones and jets have breached Polish and Estonian airspace, spurring Article 4 consultations. In Moldova, Maia Sandu alerts to Kremlin-backed unrest ahead of elections. And in a move balancing security with trade, Poland has reopened its border crossings with Belarus. Joining us to explore the implications of all of this activity is Michał Broniatowski, is Director and Editor-in-Chief of TVP World. Michał, welcome. Good to see you, and thanks for taking the time.
Thank you very much.
So much to talk about. Let's start with a soundbite from Donald Tusk and the reopening of the border with Belarus.
I wanted to inform you that, together with the Minister of Internal Affairs and Administration, we have decided to reopen the railway and road border crossings that were closed in connection with the Zapad exercises. The Minister will issue the relevant regulation today. This precautionary measure has fulfilled its purpose. At this moment, it seems that the immediate reasons for closing the borders have expired, so the crossings will reopen at midnight from Wednesday to Thursday.
Okay, so the stated reason for closing the border was the Zapad exercises, joint Belarusian-Russian exercises in Belarus. So for security reasons, do you believe that?
Partially, yes, but of course Polish authorities, when taking decision about closing the border, must have known that these drills in Belarus made by Russian and Belarusian troops would not be as big as usual. It is every 4 years. It takes place every 4 years, and 4 years ago there were 200,000 Russian soldiers who then stayed in Belarus and then attacked Ukraine a few months later. This time there were just a few thousand Russian troops, and I'm sure Polish government knew about it, and there was in fact, I don't think, any strategic reason to close the border, apart of making a political point, but also harming the flow of exports from China to Europe, so-called Silk Road.
Right.
It's yearly more than $25 billion worth of goods crossing the border between Europe and Belarus and Russia, through which this road is going, and of course it irritated China. I suspect it may have been used as sort of pressure leverage against on China in order to convince them to maybe be less supportive to in Russia's war effort in
Okay,
Ukraine.
so let me just make sure I understand this, Michał. So, yes, security may have had something to do with it, but actually there might be an underlying economic reason, that is closing the Belt and Road Initiative, the so-called New Silk Road, which transports Chinese goods into Europe. Okay, so let's go with that for a second. What do you think the Polish government wanted to achieve by exercising this leverage?
I think, again, it was more political reason than trade reason, because, it's always good if you buy something and it comes in the end.
Yeah.
But stopping it was disrupting Chinese flow of goods to Europe, and, costing them money.
Right.
And it was, as I said, was used as a tool to try to exert some pressure on Beijing to slightly change its politics towards Russia.
Towards Russia. Okay, well, it certainly had an impact, didn't it? Because we had the Chinese foreign minister coming to Poland.
By the way, this visit was a real flop because there was not even a joint statement after that, joint press conference. He came and left. So probably because of the border blockade.
Right, okay, so it was triggered by the border blockade. But now the Prime Minister Tusk, has reopened the border. What does that tell you?
Maybe something happened on the line between Beijing and Moscow. We don't know, we will never know, or someday it'll appear that there are less exports of crucial goods on so-called double use, which can be used in civilian businesses, but mostly in production of arms.
Right.
And of course, it helps in relations with Belarus in the end. Hopefully, now it may be easier to talk with President Lukashenko to convince him to release more political prisoners.
Right, okay. So, of course, there's a Polish monk currently being held in Belarus, amongst other prisoners. I'd love to continue on this, but we do need to move on. I want to move on to the Moldovan elections. Moldova's holding elections. The current government is very pro-EU, but perhaps unsurprisingly, Russia is meddling in those elections to try and stand in Moldova's EU accession. We have a soundbite from the leader of the Moldovan leader, Maia Sandu. Let's have a listen to that.
The Kremlin is pouring hundreds of millions of euros to buy hundreds of thousands of votes on both banks of the Dniester River and abroad. People are intoxicated daily with lies. Hundreds of individuals are paid to provoke disorder, violence, and spread fear.
Okay, so Russia's pouring hundreds of millions of dollars, according to Maia Sandu, into the elections. What's going on? What's the dynamic?
Well, it's a very similar situation to one that we saw last year in Romania, when Russians were massively pouring money to buy votes and influencing the election through, for example, TikTok and other platforms. The same thing we are now witnessing in Moldova, because both Romania and Moldova were, in fact, any chance for Russia to meddle into elections in Eastern Europe is always a good moment to to misbehave or just to commit crimes. But Moldova is a special case because, as we know, a large part of the country, which is on the other side of the river Dniester, Transnistria, is under control of Russia, which is very strange because it is completely separated from Russia by Ukrainian land. But still, it's very important for them to have this location, so to say, in this place. And Russia has been losing its influence over Moldova over the last decade. They now have a pro-European president, Maia Sandu. Her party is controlling parliament, and we'll see this Sunday if she manages to keep control of parliament, because Moldova is now getting all the time closer and closer to joining European Union. It was just announced by the commissioner for the for European enlargement, Mrs. Marta Kos, who said yesterday that Moldova crossed the very high-level exam, passed this exam on checking whether its legal system is compatible with the European Union.
Right.
And it's very important milestone in the process of entering.
So Moldova is getting closer and closer to EU membership.
We may, yes, and we may, it may well happen that the new government will not be that helpful. We saw it in Georgia,
right,
after the strong victory by a pro-Russian party there. Despite rhetorics of them that they still wanted to be in the European Union, their actions are completely opposite, and despite big protests of the society, so they managed, Russians, to disrupt the road of Georgia towards the European Union.
Yeah, and of course there are protests and so on going on in Moldova as well.
Yeah, so the more chaos is in the country, the more people want to look at some strong supporters, and,
right,
and a large part of Moldovan society see Russia as a strong partner and helping them. Look at the result of last year's referendum on EU, on Moldova joining EU, and it was won by just a fraction of a percent, above 50%.
Right.
And so it's very easy to.
It's very much on the balance, in the balance. But tell me something. I mean, Moldova is the poorest country in Europe, and it's tiny. It's very small population. Why is it so important to Russia?
Because it's a candidate to the European Union. Every former, and it is a former Soviet republic, and every such case is a disaster for Russia's leadership, and who see the European Union, growing European Union, and winning democracy to the west from Russia as a threat to the power of hold to power of the Kremlin, because suddenly it appears that democracy works. That's why Russia is so mad about Ukrainians' request and
Yep.
development towards the EU. Now it comes. Moldova is coming, and it's really they're very emotional people in Russia, and they see it as a problem on their honor.
Well, Putin did say that the breakup of the Soviet Union is the greatest geopolitical disaster of the 20th century. And
exactly, and this disaster is continuing.
It's continuing, and it's obvious, it's tangible now when Moldova joins the European Union. I'd like to move on now to something that's been very much in the news in terms of headlines, and that is the incursions by drones and fighter jets into NATO airspace by Russia. We had 19 drones landing in Poland. Some of them were dud, but of course you don't know that until afterwards. And two Russian fighter jets. Three Russian fighter jets, excuse me, flying over Estonia for 12 minutes until they were finally escorted out. I think we have Prime Minister Tusk with a comment on this coming up.
We will indisputably make the decision to shoot down flying objects when they violate our territory and fly over Poland. There is nothing to discuss here. However, when faced with situations that are not entirely clear, for example, the recent flight of Russian fighter jets over the Petro-Baltic platform, but without violations, one should think twice before deciding on actions that could trigger an already acute phase of conflict, since they are not our territorial waters. And that is why we are here. First of all, in constant agreement with the Allies, we are ready for any decision which is to annihilate any objects that may threaten us, for example, Russian fighter jets, if they violate our territorial waters.
Well, NATO's been kind of humming and hawing as to what to do with these incursions, but those are fairly definite, definitive words from Prime Minister Tusk. What does that tell you? Is NATO finally getting its act together?
Well, I think it's these two incursions. There were many other, but these were really...
Denmark is another one.
Now Denmark and previously single planes were flying into or close to the airspace of NATO. I think it was a big mistake, luckily, by Mr. Putin, because it really unified again Europe and NATO in its opposition against this aggression. And the fact that first Poland and now Estonia called the Article 4 asking for consultations, it's not just words. It's an action which resulted with decision to or proposal to create something which the Commissioner for Defense, the Lithuanian Mr. Kubilius, called the drone wall, which is the system of sensors and tools to shoot down these drones on the entire border of the eastern flank of NATO. So this is tangible effect of that. Plus, we heard really very strong statement from NATO, which is not an obvious thing with the President Trump being in charge, who until now has not said anything against this, not to mention, well, he's constantly saying that he was not briefed on that. Come on. So, but he says that, but let's call it elders in the room are really behaving as we would expect the United States would respond to it, and condemning and threatening Russia that it shouldn't continue doing things like that.
Understood. But so far we've only had words, right? We've had Prime Minister Tusk, we've had Foreign Minister Sikorski also at the UN talking fairly strongly about Russia's behaviour, and President Trump skirting around the edges, I would say. But how about tangible action? Because Prime Minister Tusk there was referring to doing something that Turkey did a few years ago with a Russian fighter aircraft over in its airspace for 17 seconds, I think it was, before it was shot down.
Yes.
You think Prime Minister Tusk was referring to that kind of response?
I hope so. While Brussels, the headquarters of NATO, may start thinking what to do, humming and puffing, as you said, Poland may take a single-handed decision to shoot them down, and he said Poland would do it. This word escalation, which has been constantly used by Western allies, that they are afraid of escalations. They have been afraid since for the last 3.5 years of this escalation, and they were finally they were crossing these Russian Putin's red lines, and there was no escalation. In fact,
right.
On the part of Russia. So, we will see what happens next time Russia will do it.
Indeed.
And there is no doubt they would try somehow to check.
To test it. Michał Broniatowski, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And sharing your analysis with our audience.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And that brings us to the end of this episode of News in Depth. Goodbye.